Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification when we go live every Thursday. We appreciate the growing crowd that joins us in the live chat. Anna, how you doing this week? I thought you crushed it on last week's episode.
Thank you, but hearing you fly through that intro, I just makes me a little self-conscious. I feel like when I do it, I'm like, hey, we are here.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. We are here. Here's the podcast. We are here.
I wouldn't judge you like someone maybe judged me early on this podcast and said things like, oh, I don't know. It's like you've done it 40 times. Maybe you should get it by now. But I mean, I'm just saying I'm not that guy.
Right.
Yeah. No, I thought you did great. And
did I say that to you?
No, and I definitely don't remember it word for word.
I feel like that was a collective suggestion, observation.
I mean,
I may have said that.
Oh, are you suggesting that you piled on? No.
Never happens.
No, I thought you did great, and thanks to Andy for filling in. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Good. I'll apologize to both of you as well as our audience in advance if they hear some clearing of the throat, coughing type stuff. Still got a little nasal thing working through here. So.
One of us every week.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Alex, have that button on, that hot button, whatever it is, the cursing button. It'll be the phlegm button this week.
Button.
Ew.
Nice.
I will say it is always great to get out on the trade show floor again and kind of meet people in the industry. I did, however, this last visit to Anaheim, I forgot like the 2 things you need at a trade show, right? You need your cards, and for me, a portfolio, right? Like those are like the first 2 things I pack. Forgot the cards. Like I went to leave my room in the morning to go to the show, and I'm just like, oh, it's just me then. So I ran to FedEx, bought the portfolio, paid like, I don't know, $45 for this thing with a pen.
Yeah.
First booth that I visit, they're like, hey, we have something for you. Guess what it was?
It's a portfolio.
It was a beautiful portfolio and pen, and I'm just like, throw it in the garbage. But
don't need it, thanks.
Very nice.
Can't you just use your phone? I just use my phone now. Take notes.
No, I can't. I can't tap fast enough.
Yeah.
Like,
do you get like portfolio arm though?
Oh yeah. No, when you get home and then 2 days later, like your left side of your right side of your body is hurt, and you're like, it's because I was carrying paper that I'm sore now.
I know only people who have been to trade shows before understand for whatever reason why your shoulders hurt after a trade show. Like it doesn't make sense to anyone else unless you've done it. But
yeah, or I also get new soreness now from my roller bag. Because like I only roll on the right hand. And I'm just like, why? What is happening? I'm like, from walking with my luggage to and from the airplane.
Yep.
Great. That's great.
Interesting about cards though. Like the last show I was at, nobody had cards. It was all the digital, like
the scan.
Yeah. I thought so. So that's how it was. I thought it was fine too, because that's how it was the previous trade show I went to. I would say it's a much younger demographic there. This one, everyone was just like, how do you not bring cards to a show? Just like, there was one person in particular that didn't do cards. He immediately did the LinkedIn invite. Yeah. He's just like, let's just do LinkedIn right now. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, we just met. I don't know if it's LinkedIn official, but it's good to know you. All right. Well, before we jump into our first story this week, we have a word from our new sponsor, Teledyne FLIR. Hi, I'm David Manti, and with me right now is Rob Milner with FLIR. Rob, does manufacturing have a leak problem?
David's been well established by very reputable agencies like the U.S. Department of Energy that as much as 25 or 30% of a manufacturing plant's total installed compressed air capacity is being lost to leaks right now.
That's a lot.
It is.
So let's talk about it. Join us for Acoustic Imaging for Manufacturing, How to Capture Cost Savings Through Sound on February 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Rob's going to give us a little bit more on how we can fix this leak problem. Right, Rob?
You betcha.
Hey, that was a familiar voice. Yeah, that was me on the ad. But please join us February 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn how manufacturers are using acoustic cameras to catch these problems in real time. I'm going to talk with Rob Milner, and it's just, I will honestly say this discussion kind of blew my mind because it's something like 30% of manufacturing facilities have issues with, all manufacturers are losing up to 30% of their plant's total compressed air capacity just because of leaks that they don't know about, that they can't hear. And the biggest thing is that, air is cheap, but the power is not. So I will say it was really cool checking out some of this new technology where it's sort of just a point and shoot solution to finding these leaks that otherwise, we always talk about the machine whisperer, but you can't even hear it. It's just wild. It's pretty cool technology. All right. Our first story this week. Chrysler unveils EV concept with, quote, unlimited range. On Tuesday, Chrysler debuted a new EV concept vehicle with unlimited range. But there are some caveats. The Chrysler Halcyon is a four-door coupe with dynamic wireless power transfer, or DWPT technology, that can wirelessly recharge the vehicles as they drive. Now, that caveat. To use the technology, you need specially equipped roads. DWPT uses coils under the asphalt to transfer energy directly to cars, trucks, and buses. The vehicles need a special receiver that transfers the incoming energy directly to the electric motor. The Halcyon also has smart cockpit features and level 4 autonomous driving. So a built-in AI assistant that can prep the cabin before you get in it, and it uses predictive navigation to give you the best route. Obviously, such wireless charging infrastructure is not close to being widely deployed. But, Anna, a concept car isn't about what is, but, what is now, but what's possible.
Yes, of course. Yeah. A very cool concept. I think it got a lot of attention, certainly from our audience.
Oh, yeah.
It performed pretty well on the site. And I thought it was cool. But, I've said this before, and I think some stories like this tend to be like a little bit of a double-edged sword because they help drum up, I think, excitement and interest from the public when it comes to things like EVs and the possibilities that they can offer. Conversely, I think they also hint at a future where the technology is so dramatically better that I feel like it also does the job of maybe suppressing demand in a way.
Yeah, keeping everyone in a wait and see mode.
Kind of. I think that is a wait and see that results. And that's something to me that's being underemphasized, I think, in terms of the current demand challenges that are facing automakers in terms of their EV rollout. Because you get through those early adopters, then you have a whole crop of people that are probably like me who are interested in EVs.
Yeah.
I plan to purchase an EV next, but I also have 2 paid off vehicles right now. So I'm not really in a rush. I'm kind of waiting for that sweet spot, which is probably a balance between price and technology and something that's really going to fit my needs. But so I do think that's for sure happening. I do think obviously, and you said it too, the article says it, like this, the charging on public roads, the wireless charging using these charging roads, like this is not a near-term reality. We know that.
Yeah.
Michigan did some sort of a trial rollout recently. That's really the only place we've seen these roads really actually be in any type of construction phase. And it's a very short track.
Yeah, in the U.S. anyways. Yeah,
in the U.S. So I think it's maybe a extreme example of some of the longer term technologies that we might anticipate from EVs.
Yeah.
However, I do think it is so compelling that it gets people thinking about, those possibilities and, maybe encouraging people to think past like, do I really want to get this first gen model of this EV or something? Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should see what's next. I just think these are the kind of things that are influencing buyer behavior. It's a new market. And so for those who don't have to buy right now, there's a lot of reason to wait, I think. And stuff like this, it's exciting, but at the same time, I worry that it's like contributing to that narrative of, this is a technology that's for me a couple of years down the road.
I feel like maybe for the 12-year-olds out there, they could be more wait and see. But for people in our generation that want to wait for roads filled with coils that can charge their cars, if they're interested in EVs, maybe, just dive in.
Right. But I'm not saying that's what they're waiting for. I think it's
just another thing.
It builds on the narrative of like that this technology is evolving so quickly and that, 200 miles of range might be standard today, but like maybe in 2 years it's 400, 500. Like, do I wait for that? Because we've seen it develop so quickly. I think that some of this stuff, it just like pushes that idea on people that the technology is not quite mature yet, that there's a lot in development and that maybe you should wait and just see. I don't know.
No, I mean, personally, until we have the drones that can laser beam charge into my car from space, I'm just not in.
Yeah, I would like some sort of solar attachment on my body that I could like, and then I could just like, right into my vehicle. Like whenever that's ready, that's when you will get my credit card.
I just need a solar attachment on my body to just keep me going.
Keep you awake.
Yeah, like kind of trim down the 3 pots of coffee it takes to keep these wheels running. Jeff, one of the parts of this story that kind of stood out to me was the Arena of the Future in Italy. So the Arena of the Future is this pilot project that Stellantis is a part of. And Ben, who put the story together, Ben Munson, mentioned in the story, this track demonstrates dynamic inductive recharging technology for EVs, right? And we're always talking about how racing pushes automotive innovation, right? So what if we do like a race on the Arena of the Future, this test track, and the race is that it never ends?
The race never ends?
Yeah, because
how is there a winner?
Well, I mean, the winner would be like the last car standing, essentially. I'm trying to think of ways to like make this more mainstream, and I think like a never-ending race on the Arena of the Future with this kind of futuristic charging tech would really do it.
This should not be mainstream right now. This is so far away from being practical that I'm with Anna on a lot of what she's maybe for some different reasons, but I'm on the same brainwave here because this dynamic wireless power transfer, it seems like an odd thing to throw into a concept vehicle right now because first of all, the OE, the automaker, really has a very small part in that whole puzzle. Like they do there, I mean, they can put the receiver on the vehicle and figure out how to mount that and make it work. But this is an infrastructure thing.
Yeah.
I mean, unless we're going to have some sort of mandate from the government that says every time we tear up a road, we're going to put these coils in there.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even roll this out to make this a real viable dynamic?
1 mile at a time.
Especially if that receiver is adding cost to the car. Also, and I know this is something we can figure out, but anytime you have wireless transfer between a fixed location and a moving device, if you want to call it that, with your car, there's huge security concerns as well. So there's a lot of things that we'd have to figure out here. These roads are going to cost, if we start putting this stuff in here, it's going to be anywhere from $1 to $3 million per mile. So just the cost alone right now is ridiculous. The fact that we have no idea how to make this actually work as seamlessly as we want it to, that we have that rollout in Detroit, it just feels like when you're doing a concept vehicle, there's things way before this that we could do. I think it's a huge swing, and I didn't quite get it. The one thing that I was kind of surprised about too is that they actually used basically a sedan for this. That is a different approach to go for these concept vehicles, especially in the EV side, where everything's been a CUV, an SUV, or a truck.
Yeah.
They went back to a sedan, which we heard, we talked about this however many months, years ago, about all the sedans just getting kicked out of the automaker's lineup because people didn't want them.
Yeah.
So a lot of interesting choices here by Chrysler. I think they're getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves with this one.
Yeah, I don't think they're too far ahead. I talked about this Arena of the Future test track, right? Testing began on that in 2022. With a Fiat 500 that was showing that DWPT simplified the customer approach to electric mobility, removing range anxiety, and also supported decarbonization and environmental sustainability. This Fiat 500 drove at typical highway speeds without consuming the energy stored in the battery. So that's already moving forward. But I think we're also looking at this in a very narrow view of the United States, because with a lot of these projects, right, we talk about cost, and when we're talking about what mobility is going to look like in the future, it is going to take huge changes to infrastructure. And it looks like at least France. No, but I mean, France is already trying it, right? So in July, this Israeli company called Electrion received its first order in France. The company is going to equip a section of the A10 motorway, which is southeast of Paris, with this wireless electric road system. So Electrion also has similar projects right now in Sweden, Germany, Italy, and the US. And its next generation project that's going into France is going to increase power transfer capacity and an architecture that also supports dense traffic conditions. So it could charge a lot of cars at once.
Okay, so how big are these patches of road?
So Electrion's going to deploy its 2-kilometer road and a stationary wireless charging station. So they're starting to experiment with about 1.2 miles at a time. So it was perfect that you said how much it is a mile, and it's got to be at 1 mile at a time, because that's what they're doing. And this is just the first phase of the project, and it's going to focus specifically on charging EV fleets while driving. But I'm just saying, it is a cost, it is a long road, but other countries are already taking the first step.
The moving charging station. The moving charging station. It's like putting a charging station on a 1 mile treadmill track. It's not, I don't understand. They already, if you think we have an infrastructure problem now,
right?
Then let's switch to this and see what happens.
No, I'm not saying switch to this now and see what happens. I'm just saying that this is a realistic option for something in the future, and we can't just keep kicking the can down the road when it comes to we got to find something better. Or this is so far off, we can't even consider it.
No, but I think let's complete the electric vehicle infrastructure project that we started.
Yeah.
Versus I don't think this is kicking the can down the road. I think we need to completely saturate with charging stations and do that right and see if that should work. Gas stations work.
True. But there's no reason to think that having additional options like this, particularly in dense road conditions,
just very expensive.
I know, but when you think of highly dense areas in New York and Chicago, when you're kind of stuck on city streets, and maybe you can't dive into a gas station, maybe you do need that road to help hold a charge. I don't know.
Okay, but we're already tens of billions of dollars annually behind what we need in terms of grid investment to keep up with an EV fleet.
Mm-hmm.
This is adding tens of billions of dollars onto that.
Yeah.
We're nowhere close.
I'm just saying we're nowhere close, but we need to think about it. It needs to be a potential option.
So you're doing your third space coaching here. Think about it.
I mean, 80% of the time.
David does not say to go or stop. He says, think about it.
Yeah.
As you're going past third.
But if I say think about it, that means go. And if I say think about it, that means, you know what? Hold up. John Dearden, who's back with us live. It's always good to see you, John. He says, could it be mounted to the top of the road without burying it? And I think that's part of the project that's going on in France, is that it's not in or under the road necessarily. It's attached to the road. But again,
then it's going to have to be replaced and maintained at a much higher cost than if it's embedded into the roadway.
True. Well, and that's another thing is this is not an option for every road. The option for the greater United States infrastructure is better charging station infrastructure, right? And higher reliable grid technology. However, for select portions, I think this could be a fit. Or not a fit, an option that could be explored. That they are. John also says, how about a windmill on the top of your car? And
I think that's what Homer Simpson had on his, right?
I think so, right above the bubble. I'm not sure. I think maybe Pee Wee Herman had one at one point. I'm not going to say no to anything, John. All right. Our next most popular story this week, Intel to delay $20 billion Ohio chip plant. According to the Wall Street Journal, Intel will delay its, quote, first of its kind chip plant in Ohio. The $20 billion project was supposed to come online next year and create some 3,000 jobs. But now it's being postponed due to, quote, market challenges. it looks like demand for semiconductors may be cooling, at least in the near term. Part of the problem is access to free money. The rollout of grant money from the CHIPS and Science Act has been slow. As of August, $231 billion has been announced in U.S. private sector semiconductor investments, many contingent on funding, and none of the $39 billion in domestic chip manufacturing subsidies has yet been awarded. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo says or wants to both go fast and get it right. I mean, Anna, it's hard to find fault with that, but it's also hard to execute that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Raimondo says that she's pushing her team to go fast, but as you said, also to get it right. I think this illustrates the inherent challenge in these government funding programs because there's equal pressure to do both, get these allocated quickly, but make sure that they're not being squandered. There was a ton of press coverage coming out of the pandemic around the funding programs that were designed to help small businesses. And then we later learned how much rampant fraud had taken place. And the defense, I think, at the time was this required speed to roll that money out. But then also there were staffing and technology issues kind of paired with that. And I think in this case, probably the last thing that they want is another high profile scandal over misallocated funding. However, this is a little bit different, I think, when you consider that these are high stake investments.
And it's Intel.
Big players in the industry. Yes, I agree. Reputations to consider. And you do wonder what takes so long with an Intel. I mean, for due diligence is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for that. But it's not like they just crawled out of the woodwork. This is very different than the pandemic program where you're like having to type in somebody's like small business code and like figure out if they're real and, you know, how you evaluate and vet a million SMBs that you've never heard of before. But then again, it's like, do we create different rules for the biggest companies? That's also like sort of problematic by nature. So I see that it's like sort of a knotted thing. I get that. You know, you look at what local leaders in Ohio are saying, and they're really trying to play down the significance of this delay. They're suggesting that it was almost baked into the process now that the construction didn't get underway as soon as they had wanted it to. So they didn't really start until late 2022. So they're saying like, there's no way we can get online in time at this point. And I think that's fair. It takes a certain amount of time to complete a build like that, especially with these fab plants that need, you know, very specific construction. You know, they have clean rooms, all that stuff. It's just a lot to do. But I do think you could also look at this like, I don't know, to me, I think maybe it's fair to say that they also took the opportunity to wait out what could be like a softer year and maybe the year after. And then also maybe put some public pressure on the government to get those funds out and really expedite that process because they're like, well, we're behind anyway. We might as well put their feet to the fire with this announcement and, you know, and see if it works. So it might.
I like the idea of some compliance person at Intel that has to like fill out the government paperwork, like company name, Intel.
Address.
Address. Like the Intel campus. Jeff, an Intel spokesperson said, quote, typical construction timelines for semiconductor manufacturing facilities are 3 to 5 years from groundbreaking, depending on a range of factors, and they broke ground in late 2022. So essentially like, hey, this shouldn't be such a surprise.
Yeah, fair. Okay. And I mean, I'm not going to tell Intel how to build a semiconductor manufacturing plant, whatever works for them. But I still think there is some fair scrutiny being placed on the Biden administration in terms of how they're dispersing these funds.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was interesting. I was looking at there's a think tank out there, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. They put out a kind of a paper. They're a think tank out of DC, supposedly bipartisan. I don't know. You can read the paper and make your own choices there.
No such thing.
But they had a quote in there I thought was really interesting. And they talked about the Biden administration needs to start acting more like an economic developer than a banker when it comes to these funds and everything revolving around the CHIPS Act. Yeah. Which you can appreciate because, you know, the saying here was we want to go fast and be smart. Well, you're dealing with a company, a culture that was built on and has customers that sort of thrive on the notion of go fast, break things. Okay. Yeah. So you're sort of got very different competing mindsets on how to go forward with these big projects. I think it has been a little too deliberate. You can tell there's a lot of safety and accountability things being put into these, to the point I didn't know about this, but any company receiving over $150 million in funds from these grants basically has to pay back some of the revenues that they get as a result of them. So they have to share. They're in a revenue sharing situation essentially with the government.
Interesting.
I mean,
it's based on projections, and there's definitely safeties in there, but it sort of reinforces how cautious the administration has been, which is in conflict to everything we heard. Like, here it is. Let's build all these plants. This is going to be amazing. Thousands of jobs. We're going to beat China. Here we go. But
it's raining free money.
But you still need to fill out the paperwork. So I think there is a middle ground that would be easier to get at, but that's not the way it's working right now. And I'll refrain from sharing any political thoughts there.
Well, thank you. And I think that anytime we have a story like this, it is just because of how much the state was burned by the Foxconn deal. Like, when you talk about a few more checks and balances, I'm just okay with that. Like, I get it. You want full speed ahead, and you want the 3,000 jobs at the plant, and you want the 7,000 construction jobs. That's all great, but sometimes it doesn't happen.
Yeah, you guys have already said it. I feel better about the types of companies we're talking about here and the dynamic. The one thing I wanted to add as well is they talk about semiconductor demand cooling. It is, but that's because the supply chain's not on fire right now. Yeah. We still need a lot more semiconductors than we're making. Yeah. It's just not to the point where we have empty vehicles sitting on lots right now without the electronics. Yeah. We've gotten past that. That doesn't mean we still don't need a lot of this stuff.
No, that's a great point. And I've seen that, there's been so many earnings calls in the last few months where these companies are talking about Q4, we were down 5% year over year. Well, okay, that sounds bad in a vacuum, but their growth in Q4 last year was 15, 20%. So no wonder. Yeah. They're still actually doing quite well, but if you read it, you have to read it the right way.
Yeah. It's cooling, like you said, because it's not on fire. Yeah. I pulled a couple of interesting quotes from this piece from News 5 in Cleveland, and it comes from the perspective of the construction side of things, right? So Mike Nisley, he's with the Ohio State Building and Construction Trades Council. They're a union with 100,000 members, right? His quote was, "Delays, we understand that. We just don't want the project to come to a screeching halt." Then he goes on to say, "This is par for the course, but just because delays are normal doesn't mean that they aren't frustrating." And I liked kind of a common sense approach to that. Just some of this can be expected, but it still sucks. He also said that he also shared some insights in dealing with Intel. He said, "Intel will tell you they will move at light speed and expect all of their partners to move at that same light speed. And then they'll pump the brakes." So it sounds like there's a lot of frustrated people ready to get to work out there, and hopefully things can clear up and proceed in a nice, orderly, calm fashion. All right. Our next most popular story this week. Woman pleads guilty for shipping components found in Russian weapons. A 32-year-old Canadian national this week pleaded guilty for her role in a multi-million-dollar scheme to ship components for unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, guided missile systems, and other weapons to blacklisted companies in Russia. Shipping the parts violated export control and sanction laws, and the components were actually found in Russian weapons platforms and intelligence equipment on the battlefield in Ukraine. Kristina Puzyreva pleaded guilty in a New York court to money laundering conspiracy as part of a sophisticated scheme involving two companies registered in Brooklyn, SH Brothers and SN Electronics. Using the companies as a front, Puzyreva and her co-conspirators illegally sourced, purchased, and shipped millions of dollars in electronic components and integrated circuits from U.S. manufacturers to sanctioned entities in Russia. SH Brothers made hundreds of shipments worth more than $7 million. And during the investigation, the government uncovered some pretty bold text exchanges between Puzyreva and her husband. For example, in January 2023, Nikolay, her husband and co-conspirator, complained that a co-conspirator, quote, asked me to make 80 accounts. Fingers hurting already from the laptop. His wife responded, "Lot of money? We will get rich." So far, the government has seized some $1.68 million related to the illegal export, and Puzireva faces up to 20 years in prison. Jeff, this story was particularly aggravating, especially when it comes to the simple fact that they did $7 million in sales and they got less than 2 back so far.
Well, yeah, that's one of them, I guess.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And, selling all the components to blacklisted companies and then winding up on the battlefield in seized weapons and equipment. That part too.
Yeah, for a megalomaniac dictator who is trying to basically just steal land from somebody. Yeah, Lots of interesting things here. One thing I will say is this is not a complex criminal mind at work here.
No.
For them to be caught relatively quickly, and hopefully they do recover more of that money. But this is also weird because this woman was like basically globetrotting, posting selfies of her in all of these ridiculous places with stupid hashtags and everything else you can imagine. So not the sharpest tool in the shed. Also the fact that they kept the serial numbers on everything, which is how they were able to trace it back to her. Yeah. Again, a real brilliant move there, thankfully. I think the one thing that this reinforced me, and we've talked about this in other situations similar to this one, the next time you start looking at implementing or integrating supply chain visibility software or tools, this is one of the reasons we do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Because even though these suppliers or distributors who are responsible in this really can't be blamed at this point anyway, maybe they will be down the line. That'll be interesting to see if there's some fallout there in terms of knowing who your customer is and what's going on with the stuff you're selling and distributing.
Oh, like potential threats to the manufacturers.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see. I know that's a very gray area there, pun intended. But to see if there's more fallout from that. The thing that got me too, and this was on a Vice article that covered this story, she took a selfie in front of a mall on the same day that 7 Russian missiles slammed into the Ukrainian city of Mykovia. So these missiles were having the guidance systems that were enabled by the components that she was illegally selling.
Yeah.
So it brings it home.
It was pretty despicable, and you cannot claim ignorance on knowingly ship. Like, you don't just think that you're shipping these electronic components and integrated circuits to Russia. Just,
The only thing that I could say is there was just a complete just not caring. Basically, that's wrong. We're going to like you said, make lots of money, right?
Yeah. True. I mean, we definitely saw the thought process there. Did you make a gray market pun there?
Yeah,
that was solid.
Yeah. I'm not proud of that.
It did seem like they were funding quite the travel budget. One thing I was thinking about, Anna, is that so they kind of attacked Puzireva for being this millennial influencer online and on Instagram, and also this, person committing some serious crimes. Can you call a person an influencer if they're averaging 10 likes? What's the threshold there? She was an influencer in her mind only.
Yeah. I don't know what the threshold is.
Yeah.
But it seems pretty low.
She was an influencer to friends and family only.
I definitely am an influencer to my mom for sure, pretty seriously. Okay. This whole story was pretty depressing to read, but I don't know that the issue is about them claiming ignorance. They probably wanted to support the Russians. You know what I mean? I don't know that it was necessarily oops, we did something bad. They're no, they're Russians. So maybe.
No, these aren't just ignorant Canadians.
Right, exactly. So they may have felt some allegiance to that approach, unfortunately. But the reports from the DOJ said that they were linked to 298 shipments over those 2 years. Specifically, the scheme started in Brooklyn, as you said. So where they were buying this technology, they would send it through, I think, Montreal, and then ship from there to Turkey, Hong Kong, India, China. And then it would from there go to Russia. So there was a little bit of thought put into it. It wasn't just shipping direct from, but
I thought that was also more on the their co-conspirator. It seemed like they were procuring everything, and then the third party was orchestrating it more. That was the vibe I got.
Yeah, there were definitely, her charges were more specific to the money laundering side of the operation, although it does sound like they were maybe the Montreal connection there to kind of get that from the U.S. to overseas.
Yeah.
Either way, the report said that some of the components shipped were of the highest concern due to their critical role in the production of advanced Russian precision-guided weapons systems. I don't know if you have been watching the news lately, but there was Ukraine was hit by a hypersonic missile for the first time this week.
Oh, and I didn't see that.
They're talking about how it's really a signal that, Russia's gaining access to some of these more sophisticated attack methods, and that these types of crimes mean that Ukraine has very little defense you can't defend against hypersonic attacks. You just can't. And so it's really scary to think about, just how vast and terrible the victimization of this country is, just based on this scheme that she and he, multiple people, just wanted to make some extra money, and it's just, it's catastrophic. So yeah, really, really terrible story. I mean, I hope that everyone who's involved gets the book thrown at them. I don't know if you know more about some of the co-conspirators besides her husband.
All I know is that the husband and the other co-conspirator are awaiting trial. Everyone was arrested in October 2023. I mentioned the husband's first name, Nikolai. It's Nikolai Goltsev and Salim Zizan Nazdanov. Pretty sure I nailed both of those, at least on the second try. But no, it was the next trials will shed a little bit more light on the extent of their roles in it. Because you're right, they charged her mostly with the money laundering, conspiracy. I was kind of surprised based on the gravity of the situation in terms of where these components were going and what they were going into, that her sentence will max out at 20 years. I don't know if maybe she wound up helping the investigation, but it'll be interesting to see what charges Nikolai and Salim Dizan will face going forward. And to your point, hopefully the book is thrown at them, just because saying hopefully the book is thrown at them is just still much less graphic than any other comments anyone else said in terms of what potential penalties should be in terms of preventing this type of behavior going forward. So, all right, our next most popular story. United grounds brand new planes over no smoking signs. Late last year, Airbus delivered 5 new A321neo planes to United Airlines, and they were quickly in service. The new planes were an upgrade with enhanced cabin spaces like a welcome area, extra personal space, better views, and larger overhead bins. United was happy enough with the A321neo that it ordered 180 of them. But this week, United had to ground them, and not because of any missing bolts or other problems. Nope. It was the no smoking signs. When regulators banned smoking on domestic flights in 1990, they required the airplane's no smoking signs to be operated by the flight crew. The A321neo's no smoking sign is lit up by software. In 2020, United was granted an exemption to this rule, but it only applied to the planes that were listed on the document when it was filed. Since the A321neo is new, it didn't fall under the exemption, and United had to ground the fleet. Well, it didn't last long. The FAA cleared the A321neos to fly while its fresh request for exemption was being processed. The grounding was over quickly because it wasn't safety-related, Anna, but maybe still an irrelevant and outdated one.
Yeah. And to be honest, United dropped the ball here, but I'm going to go after the FAA anyway.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know. I mean, it was obvious why this article was popular or the video was popular. Smoking on airplanes is such an antiquated concept for the vast majority of today's flying public that the minutia around enforcing this rule seems like wholly unnecessary.
Yeah.
Do we even need those signs anymore? Like, you can't smoke anywhere. We know that. Like, they can just say that. I don't know. But anyway, that's...
I don't get why the exemption in 2020 is for only these planes, and then like the last bullet isn't, and all future planes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, the first reaction to this was an eye roll for me, but the second one was more like, just frustration and sort of anger, because I think the FAA has much bigger fish to fry. You mentioned that they cleared the plane to fly. They did, but like it was like almost like a temporary, like.
Oh yeah, no, they're
still working through the details of this very, very important issue behind the scenes. So who knows how long that will take. But we know that the FAA announced in January an increase in its oversight on Boeing, on their production and their manufacturing. We know they're investigating Boeing. They said they need to think about re-examining the delegation of authority there. We also published a story this week about how the NTSB wants the FAA to retrofit current aircraft with better cockpit voice recorders because they've lost so much evidence over the last number of years. Because they only store 2 hours at a time, and some of it's been recorded over.
Yeah. What's crazy about that too is that, we've even brought that up, like how ridiculous only having 2 hours of tape is.
Yeah.
But then they only ask for like 25. Just like, with the technology we currently have, you should be able to record like weeks worth of data.
That's true, but how long are flights typically?
I know, but I'm just saying, let's get ahead of it.
I don't want to get on a 25 plus hour flight.
No.
Anyway, I just think, unfortunately, you get a story like this and it just sort of like suggests to you that like the FAA is this very stodgy bureaucratic organization that they're juggling this law that's completely past its utility. And it feels like just such a colossal waste of time that United needs to fill out this paperwork to begin with, that the FAA has to grant this like temporary exemption so they can really go through the process and like just somebody press delete on the stupid rule and move on. You know what I mean? It's just like they have so many legitimate safety related concerns to be dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. And this is just such a, like softball. It just seems like move on. But to me, it was just watching a plane get grounded when there's all these other planes grounded because of actual legitimate safety problems.
Like missing bolts.
Like
big one.
It was almost laughable if it were not so frustrating to see this take place.
Completely agree. And they just received more resources, but I think they could be working on something else other than this. Jeff, I was just thinking about this on the plane. The light came on, the cigarette with the slash through it, just like, at what point does that even stop anybody anymore, right? Because this is a rule from 1990.
Yeah.
After TSA and bigger regulations hit in 2001, no one's going to smoke. Especially because airlines and airline personnel can really, maybe it was a different time back then where they just didn't have any ability to really get you in trouble if you didn't listen. People just sitting there smoking like, what are you going to do about it? Well, now they're going to kick you off. They're going to ban you from all future flights, and you're probably going to be in jail for, a certain amount of time. Yeah. It's just, I was just laughing about this Thursday as I was flying. And the only thing I thought is do they need the huge vaping cartridge in there too with the slash through it? They're not going to know. I'm not smoking a cigarette like this sign indicates. I'm smoking an electronic box of smoke. I don't know. That was the biggest thing for me is we're so far past this that I can't believe this is still necessary.
Well, it's interesting. Before I rain down elbows from the top rope on United here, because Anna gave them a little bit of a pass, they're just as much to blame in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
I had to choose,
Yeah, both parties are equally accountable for the ridiculousness. The one thing I will sort of tip my cap to United for is no flights were missed, rescheduled, anything. So they did do a nice job there for logistically in terms of planning. Consumers were not put out in any way, which is a positive. And it is interesting when you look back at the history of this rule, basically it did come from a safety perspective in that they wanted airline personnel to have control of all internal signage. So when you're looking at exit rows and everything else, they wanted all of that to fall under the same control of one group. You can appreciate that, but as you've both alluded to, this is ridiculous. And it's ridiculous on United's part.
Yeah.
The fact that anytime you get a new plane, all you had to do is add the name onto the form and send it in. I mean, come on, that's got to be somebody's job.
Yeah.
Right.
But to come up to this point where you actually risk losing $5 billion aircraft is ridiculous, especially in this day and age. Now, how consumer confidence in airlines hasn't dropped so far is kind of mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
But according to all the reports, people are still good to go, not voicing a ton of concerns over anything with Boeing or any of the, like, I can't believe the price increases haven't gotten people more fired up.
Oh, yeah.
What you're paying for flights. So when you take all of those things into consideration, and again, you guys have both alluded to it, how United wouldn't be checking every box and making sure every I is dotted and T is crossed to keep them out of the headlines kind of blows your mind.
Yeah.
And this was a very simple thing. At some point, this is going to resonate on a consumer level. And you wonder what kind of impact it's going to have on the bigger airlines. Because if you're going to be charging what they're charging, the expectation is elevated as well.
Yeah.
So come on.
And it's not $1 billion plane. But it was $1 billion in planes. So in 2018, as of 2018, this A321neo's list price was about $130 million.
All right, my bad.
So, but I mean, enough to have that sort of feature built in. And another thing that kind of blew my mind on the plane is that, these are brand new planes, right? But we still have to have, they said, make sure all the windows are open, both when you take off and when we're landing. And I was just curious. So I just asked the flight attendant, I was like, hey, buddy, why do we got to have the windows open? And he just looks at me and he's like, because if there's a fire, I need to know what side it's on. I'm just like, okay, A, you are having definitely a bad day. And B, that's crazy to me that like in how like technologically advanced we have become, we still need the windows open so we know where the fire is.
Wait, so you're just like yelling out questions to the flight attendants during the flight?
Airplane
questions?
He wasn't like far away. I mean, he was walking past, like he was doing the seatbelt check, right? Where he was just looking at everybody, like, everybody okay, sir? Lift yourself up so we can see if there's a seatbelt under there. And then I was just like, hey, I'm just kind of curious why the windows, and just like came right at me. I'm like, noted. Don't talk to you for the remainder of the flight. He's
not the guy to ask for the wings pin in the cockpit.
No, yeah.
You gotta ask a different person.
Did you have to go see the captain?
Yeah, excuse me, sir. Thank you. Can I have some water, some coffee, but that's not too hot? Maybe some earbuds, a pillow. No, left him alone. So I would also like to take a minute to talk about like actual comfort on airplanes, because not the 321, but the 320, the Airbus 320neo, actually is supposed to offer the least amount of legroom for all aircraft models.
Awesome.
It's an average of 28 inches. So that was one thing that kind of stood out, where it was like, man, we got all these luxury comforts, like bigger cabin spaces, a nicer welcome area, extra personal space, but like not in front of you.
Did you see the jet lag reducing LED lights? That was my favorite.
Yeah, that was.
Not sure what that is.
Not sure. I mean, are those like the happy lights? They
I think
just
so.
Keep those on you?
Maybe. Yeah, just like a vitamin D.
So I wanted to look into this, because did you guys catch when Southwest Airlines took a little bit of heat because they were unveiling their new interiors? And like the big quote that came out is that one person just responded, "Is there an option to just stand?"
Oh, jeez.
Which, I mean, when you're looking at it, you're like, I mean, I might be more comfortable.
Yeah.
John thinks he wants to know, or he says, I think the pilots would know if an engine caught fire. You would think, but I mean, there's a communication. The engine's got a lot on their plate. They can't communicate that to the flight attendants necessarily. Who knows? So, which airline do you think is the best when it comes to legroom, and which do you think is the worst? Unless you guys already know this.
The best? That's hard, because I usually just bite the bullet and like buy an exit row.
Yeah.
Because I struggle, but the best. I don't know, is it Southwest?
Southwest is up there. They're number 2. Anna, fancy a guess?
No, I fly Delta almost exclusively, so I don't.
Oh man, I do too, but the options are just getting more and more limited, especially when you book about one day before you travel. So JetBlue's number 1. It's 32.3 inches of legroom. Then Jeff, Southwest, 31.8. Alaska and Delta Airlines, and a number 3 at 31 inches of legroom. American 30.2, United 30.1. Then we dip under 30. Hawaiian Airlines 29 inches, and Frontier and Spirit Airlines 28 inches of legroom. Actually, I was looking at, I wanted to see the interior of these A321s and A320s because I'm like, oh my God, they got to be revolutionary, right? And then I looked at it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I just flew on that plane. Like, and it was an Airbus A320 on Spirit Airlines, and I was just like, yep, close quarters.
It didn't blow you away, huh?
No, it wasn't full of, let's say, a lot of creature comforts.
No, sorry.
At least you avoided the red eye this time, right?
I did, but we'll get into that.
Oh.
All right. I didn't book a red eye for the first time. I'm just like, man, everyone is going to be so proud of me. I'm just like, I booked a normal flight home. Everything should go fine. Our most popular story this week: U.S. Army scrapping helicopter program after spending billions. The Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, or FARA program, was meant to create the U.S. Army's new weaponized scout helicopter. The Army had even held a design competition to find the replacement for the Vietnam-era OH-58 chopper once it was retired. According to Defense News, the Army has spent at least $2 billion on the FARA program and earmarked some $5 billion for development over the next 5 years. The Raider X prototype from Lockheed Martin's Sikorsky was a FARA frontrunner, and Bell Textron was also a player with the Bell 360 Invictus. Despite engine delays from General Electric Aerospace, test flights were supposed to happen later this year. Well, that was until last week when Army officials said they are ending FARA as part of a major overhaul that's also going to see the end to the Shadow and Raven fleets. The focus will be shifted to the Blackhawks, the newest Chinook cargo helicopter, the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft, and General Drone R&D. General James Rainey says the shift shouldn't be viewed, quote, as a failure, Jeff, because other modernization efforts remain ahead of or on schedule. I mean, a $2 billion hit's still got to be a failure, just like even a little one, right?
Actually, I disagree. I'm going to stick up for the DoD here.
Okay.
I think this is a prime example of when you start planning out and you're looking at what's going on in terms of what you need at the time, at that moment in time, and how it's going to project down the road. It can be very difficult, especially when you see the abrupt change in our military landscape right now. At the time when this was a big hot button and was really seen as we need this, we were involved in a lot of situations where there was urban warfare. We were in the mountains, we were in the desert. And this type of chopper made a ton of sense in terms of working ahead 20 to 30 miles and seeing what was going on, reporting back and giving that surveillance. Well, our new targets are a little bit different. They're further away, okay? That's why we've seen a lot more investment in ships with longer, bigger capacities to go further, go faster. Yeah. We've seen more amphibious developments because there's a potential for landing on a lot of beachheads and islands. We've seen things from aircraft perspective in terms of longer range, being able to shoot from further out, all of those types of things and reach the enemy. We've also looked at a lot of things from electronic surveillance perspective that's being embedded into a lot more aircraft, maritime vessels, stuff on the land, stuff on the ground. So this makes sense to me. I think this really shifted from a we got to have this to it'd be really kind of nice.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at all those other developments that are taking so much more of a priority, as again, we're looking at if there is a conflict, it's most likely going to be in Asia, Russia, that type of situation. We need something different than what this project certainly had in mind. So I get it. I'll also defend the DoD in terms of a lot of the things that were part of this aircraft and what was being developed is a lot of the internal communications capabilities in terms of being able to extract information and share it back home. And that's still going to be vital. It's just going to be sending it over much longer distances to those who need it. So I get it. I think a lot of the technology that was developed for these choppers is still going to be utilized in these other vessels, these other aircraft, other Jeeps, trucks, whatever we need it for. So it makes sense. The other thing is you ask any Black Hawk pilot, and it's kind of like that line from Days of Thunder where the guy says there's nothing he can't do with a race car. Yeah. Those guys are confident there is nothing they can't do with a Black Hawk helicopter, and I've experienced some of it.
Okay. So, Anna, do you feel the same? Not a $2 billion miss, small hit. I'm just saying a small, but just, a successful $2 billion pivot.
It's the defense budget. It can take a hit. I actually agree largely with Jeff, and he said it in a much more eloquent way than I would have. But, if you look at, so Defense News called this one of the department's most significant program cancellations in the last decade. But there have been more cancellations. Like the Army twice canceled potential replacement efforts for the Armed Scout. In 2004, the Comanche, that was $9 billion in for 2 prototypes. 4 years later, they canceled the Armed Reconnaissance Helicopter. In the last attempt before FARA, the service asked industry to bring commercial off-the-shelf aircraft to a fly-off to fulfill this mission, but the Army walked away from that effort because they found nothing that met the requirements. So it sounds like it's sort of an easier said than done type project. Even the Army Chief of Staff, Randy George, was quoted in Defense News as saying that the need is there, but as Jeff alluded to, the technology has changed. And so, they're looking at what's going on in Ukraine and they're seeing that the needs are just different now. And I think that is unfortunately part and parcel of these long-term contracts that require a lot of dev time. It just, as Jeff said, things advance too rapidly. So you will have this stuff take place, even though that $2 billion number is hard for us to swallow as taxpayers, I think. And you're looking at and like, why does this happen? Why are these always so over budget? And it just feels like a money hemorrhage, but at the same time, you kind of understand the reason for it too.
No, you're right. I guess when you're looking at it, a $2 billion hit is a bargain when you think about being in a potential battlefield with the wrong equipment. All right. Well, before we jump into, in case you missed it, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our sponsor and myself. Sorry about that. It's just like, here, take a break from me. Here's more shouting from me.
David sponsored the podcast this week.
Right? Our new sponsor, Teledyne FLIR. Hi, I'm David Manti, and with me right now is Rob Milner with FLIR. Rob, does manufacturing have a leak problem?
David's been well established by very reputable agencies like the U.S. Department of Energy that as much as 25 or 30% of a manufacturing plant's total installed compressed air capacity is being lost to leaks right now.
That's a lot.
It is.
So let's talk about it. Join us for Acoustic Imaging for Manufacturing, how to capture cost savings through sound on February 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Rob's going to give us a little bit more on how we can fix this leak problem. Right, Rob?
You betcha.
Hey, I'm back, but did I go anywhere? Just a reminder that up to 30% of your plant's total compressed air capacity is being lost to leaks right now. I mean, the air is cheap, but the power isn't. So please join myself and Rob Milner. We're going to have a discussion on February 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern to learn how manufacturers are using these acoustic cameras to catch these problems in real time. Jeff, one of the things that stood out to me is, so they are just using this camera. They're pointing it at a conveyor, and they can tell which bearing's about to go. It's wild. It is wild.
Yeah. No, I mean, this technology for the FLIR-based stuff, the whole thermal tomography that we get into here, it is amazing. And it's really been a game changer when you look at plant maintenance and what it's been able to do from a predictive and proactive perspective. So,
and the reason we're doing it live is because I really do like the sort of interactive environment, similar to like we have for the Today in Manufacturing podcast, where people can ask questions and kind of, challenge some of the things we say. So, register now, and we hope to see you at the live event. All right, in case you missed it, stories, maybe not as popular, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'll go first this week. I chose a story. It's another contributed article or a column titled, "We Need Hands-On Training in Manufacturing." In a new article from Michael Collins, the author of Dismantling the American Dream, How Multinational Corporations Undermine American Prosperity, he says, we know that U.S. manufacturing is on pace to have 2.1 million unfilled jobs by 2030. The Department of Labor shows 547,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs as of November last year. And while it seems that the digital revolution in manufacturing is being presented as the answer to manufacturing's need for skilled workers, and that all of this training can be done online, Collins says that smart manufacturing is a pipe dream, especially if workers don't first have all the skills to do their jobs. Collins says that the key to replacing these highly skilled workers at jobs in machine shops, forging and stamping, mold making, machine tool manufacturers, and more, if they don't have these skills, the only way to replace them is apprenticeships using hands-on experience, 90% hands-on training specifically. Basically, he says we can't have a smart factory of the future if we don't know how everything works in the factory of today. And I chose this particular story, this column, for that fact alone. This is really good insight from Michael Collins again about where, like, the specific categories that are taking hits. And just as a sort of hands-on learner myself, you know, I can take every tutorial, I can take all the online training, but I do it once and I know more about it than I probably did that entire course. So I really agree with this. I think that we have seen a lot of progress when it comes to apprenticeships. It was one thing that I was actually happy to see continued on by the Biden administration that was really championed by the Trump administration, are these apprenticeship programs in manufacturing. And I think it's very important. And we're talking about huge numbers, like 2.1 million unfilled jobs in 2030. I mean, that's huge, but we already have more than 500,000 right now. So what'd you think of this piece from Mr. Collins?
So honestly, it was on my queue to read. I did not get to this one, but I did get a chance to skim it. The only caveat I would say, and you know, I like Mike as well, you know, and we've worked with him for a number of years. We've all had conversations with him. Definitely appreciate his passion. Yeah. And in terms of somebody who should be sort of an elder statesman or spokesperson for the industry, he fits the bill in every way, shape, and form. Yeah. The one thing that I would disagree with him here, though, is that I don't think apprenticeships are the only answer.
Oh, completely agree. Yeah.
You know, he's very much an advocate for this is what has worked in the past. We need to do more of this now. And I can appreciate some of that. The caveat that I would offer is I've got 3 daughters. Yeah. Every one of them learns in a different way. Mm-hmm. For some folks, for one of them, you got to show her. She's got to be right there, see it, do it. That's the only way it's going to work. The other one, I've got another one who she's a note taker. She's going to take it down. She's going to understand it. In order for her to apply it in person, she's got to understand it in her head first. The other is sort of a hybrid of the two. Yeah. And that's what we need, especially when we look at Generation Z being this next generation and trying to get them more involved in manufacturing. Whether we like it or not, every piece of research I've seen has said, you got to make it right for me. Oh, yeah. I am not going to be as capable to adapt exclusively to what you want to do. You got to meet me halfway. Yeah. And I think that's what's going to be important with all of these training initiatives and getting more people involved. This is what we know. How does this work? Where do you want to come from it? How do you want to come at it? And meet in the middle and figure out something that works. So it's really going to be up to manufacturers to customize their approach to a degree, not all the way, but to a degree to make it work for each individual.
No, I think that's important too. Like when we talk about hands-on training, it's also exposure to additive manufacturing, robotics, because one of the things that kind of seems to be a common theme in Nolan Beilstein's Gen Z in Manufacturing podcast series is that's the aha moment, is when they have that hands-on experience with robotics or programming robotics or working with 3D printing or, you know, actually using the technology, but I mean, also being supported by a hybrid education on it. Anna, what were your thoughts on Mike's piece?
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with Jeff that it's not, I don't think it's the only way, but I see the benefit of promoting it as an option because it's one that's kind of fallen away in the manufacturing sector. But I will say this about apprenticeship programs. There are a lot of trades that have very robust apprenticeship programs in place currently. And I think that the ones that do are the ones that have very high paying careers on the other side of them.
Yeah.
So manufacturing has to reconcile with that. You cannot bring somebody in for a 1-2 year program and then expect that they're going to come out the other side and work for you for $22 an hour.
Right.
That's a great point.
So that's, I think, part of this that has to shift is if we want those highly skilled workers, we can get them.
Yeah.
But there is a cost to that.
No, you're right, because one thing he does specify that these are, he calls them journey level jobs. And if it's going to be a journey level job, you gotta pay. You gotta pay to play. He does mention, I mentioned some of the specific industries that they would be in, but this he has basically spells out 3 types of training. There's the entry level training, which drill press operators, work helpers, assemblers, stuff like that. Then semi-skilled training, CNC machine operators, welders, grinders, machine tenders. And then the jobs he's talking about, this is advanced training, replacing those highly skilled workers that are facing retirement. And, these are jobs that would lead to that journey level certification. But Anna, that is a great point about like, hey, if I'm going to be a journey person, is that a thing?
Yep.
If I'm going to be a journey person, you got to pay me. Anna, in case you missed it this week.
I selected a story titled "Consumers Have Fewer Choices as Brands Prune Their Offerings." I thought this was an interesting piece, mostly targeted at the food market, but others as well. So it starts about Coca-Cola saying that the company recently decided to discontinue half of its 400 different drink types, which I was surprised by that number.
That's high.
Shedding recently brands like Tab, Zico Coconut Water, Diet Coke Feisty Cherry. That's a thing.
That one stood out.
Was a thing.
Did you cut it or did the market select that one out?
Yeah, right. And Odwalla juices, but still leaving about 200 others to choose from. It's a move that other businesses are making as well, reducing the variety of offerings from mayonnaise to cereals to cars, and instead focusing on what they think will sell best. The article says that during the pandemic, the pruning accelerated with companies focusing on necessities as they wrestled with supply chain clogs. And then even after the pandemic, when goods began to move freely again, many businesses decided that less was better and justified the limited selection by asserting that shoppers don't want so much choice. And it's also more profitable for them, obviously, to carry fewer items. They don't have leftovers to be discounted. Some analysts have added to this discussion that they do think that consumers actually do want less choice, that maybe
make it easier on them.
It does. And, potentially there's just an overabundance of items on the grocery store shelf. And maybe you don't need 16 varieties of Doritos or whatever,
Yeah. You don't need Doritos or Cheetos flavored mac and cheese. You just don't need that.
You don't need those, no. So I thought it was interesting. It feels a little bit like low hanging fruit, but it is a sound business strategy that we're seeing from companies in all industries. I think we see that the trend of becoming a one-stop shop kind of come and go. But with that approach, you see businesses struggle with things like cost, supply chain, just overall complexity of their business, discounting, inventory issues. So sometimes the numbers just don't support it. And I think, observers tend to get scared when they see cuts and layoffs and the effects of streamlining. But, we like, for example, like we just talked about Ford cutting production on a specific model. That's this also, that's, those automakers are making those same choices right now. It's a difficult decision to cut products, but at the same time, they realize that that's the only functional way to move forward. So I think articles like these are just a good reminder that this abundance of choice might not actually be good for consumers or businesses. And unfortunately, sometimes the results are down the road layoffs,
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the businesses just can't operate this way. So
is part of this related to the rise of like flash, kind of like we were mocking the other day, like the, was it Burt's Bees and like the Hot Wing mashup?
Oh yeah.
Where they do like those flash weird sales of stuff, sell it and get rid of it, to like kind of create this urgency and demand and then just discontinue it. rather than adding it to the line?
I mean, I think definitely there's a marketing element to the oversaturation of product options. However, I don't think that's what this is really referring to. I think it's really more of like streamlining that offering and taking out the dead weight. I don't think that stuff, I mean, that stuff is a lot of, again, that's the marketing budget. That's temporary.
Well, but I mean, like, so I see Diet Coke Feisty Cherry. And I think like
you won't now.
Well, no, I mean, you won't see it now. But so Jeff, when I see a product like that, I think, okay, maybe if that was something that came out for like limited availability for a 2-month window, you know, maybe they might sell some more units or whatever, versus instead of carrying it permanently. I don't know how many people are reaching for that. So, I mean, to me, it sounds like a little bit of getting smarter and streamlined, and also possibly another opportunity for these sort of flash gimmicks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen this in the grocery store aisles. Definitely people or companies kind of cutting down on the offerings. I think one of the biggest factors in this, though, is sort of the rise in store brands. Yeah. I think store brands are taking up a lot more shelf space with retailers, and they're seeing a return on it because sometimes it is simple. And it can also be an impact of, okay, Kraft's has 4 different types of mayonnaise out here. As a result, that Kraft brand, the very basic mayo that I'm looking for, is like 80 cents more than the store brand. Yeah. And there may be an instance where I'll just grab the store brand because it's cheaper and it's easier and I know exactly what it is, as opposed to sorting through these 7 different options here. Yeah. So I think that's having a role. I think ultimately it is the consumer that makes these choices for the manufacturer in most cases. And I think also the retailers, they're going to go with what is going to win. They want what they're going to sell and move off the shelf. So as we've seen, especially with food being hit so hard with inflation and prices going up so much, I think this makes a ton of sense. And hopefully the trickle down is if they're spending fewer resources to put out the highest selling products, maybe we'll start to see a little bit of a price break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All this stuff you didn't think you needed.
Yeah. Definitely an increase in generics on the shelves. And I mean, that's just, hopefully that relieves any of the price pressure that we're all facing at the grocery store. One part that the article mentioned that hit a little close to home for me was talking about like limiting clothing options at Kohl's. So, you know, they talk about how last year Kohl's had these tables stacked with different sweaters and shirts in a rainbow of colors. And now you kind of see like fewer colors, fewer racks worth of stuff. And the only reason I don't like that is because I love when you're looking at that table and like there's like 3 of each and then there's one with like 40. And you're like, oh, that's the one nobody wants because it's the ugliest and I need to have it. Like, I mean, that's also why I love, you know, look at like a clearance rack at like a Farm and Fleet. Quality items there that are just like, oh, I understand why everyone turned away from these. And that's why I'm going to buy 2 of them.
So call Kohl's and complain because you don't know how to pick out ugly clothes now, is what you just said?
No, I need because it sounds like they're cutting. I mean, I need my Diet Coke Feisty Cherry as a plaid shirt, which actually I would love that shirt.
You know
if
what?
That was the color.
You're the guy that goes in the like clearance aisle though, right? At the grocery store to buy all the, the products that they're moving out. Yeah. So I guess you probably find that feisty cherry there.
Oh my God.
Ugh.
That just... Like, talk about a visceral response to a sentence. Just like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you on so many levels.
So many.
Jeff, what's your, in case you missed it this week?
So hopefully this isn't too patronizing, but I actually picked an article I wrote for our cybersecurity coverage.
Not at all.
It's breaking down Black Basta's big year. And basically Black Basta is a Russian ransomware group that netted over $100 million in attacks last year. Their most notorious of which, they hit ABB with a ransomware attack, netted over $1 million just from them. Their tactics is basically, I mean, they're kind of double jerks. They do this double extortion campaign where they upload the malware and however they can get in, whether it's through an email phishing campaign, internet connected devices, whatever the case is. And in addition to encrypting your data, they also threaten to publish it if you don't pay them. Okay. And they were very successful for a while. The reason I kind of want to call this one out is, number one, a lot of people don't like to talk about these hacker groups because they don't want to give them any more attention. They don't want to, give them their flowers, so to speak. I think it's worth doing that. I think it's important to do that and have very open conversations about these folks because they're the ones coming for you. Okay. These are the people, and it's important to understand their tactics, their mindset, and how they're doing it. This is a business. This is not personal. I mean, this is straight up. They're not caring who they hit. They only are also successful 1 out of 3 times. They targeted a number of people. They still hit 90 different companies, but they weren't successful every time. And I think that's also a key part of the message here is we're getting better. Okay.
Yeah.
Even though we had this group that had this ridiculous amount of success, it also tailored off towards the end of last year because there was an organization that figured out how to fight back against the malware that they use.
Yeah.
There was also a global law enforcement push to shut down the provider of the malware that Basta was using. So there's a lot of positive momentum. It's not just glorifying these criminals for how successful they were. It's also showing we're doing better. We're getting there. We're figuring out some stuff, and we need to continue with that due diligence in terms of understanding really how big our digital landscape is and defending all that stuff and understanding it, and also understanding the tactics that these bad guys are using to get in the door. So was
this the result of an interview, or how did you come up with this piece on the Black Basta?
A lot of different sources. Yeah. A lot of different, there was some curating going on here.
No, I was just curious because I was like listening to the Security Breach podcast series and reading these stories, like they blow my mind. Like the one thing I wanted to stop at certain booths at the trade show after the episode where they talked about hacking torque wrenches. Yeah. Because there was the torque wrench. And I'm just like, what are you doing about that? You know? And it's, I don't know, it's wild and much more of a threat than I think people give it credit for.
Well, I think the positive thing that's happening and the reason that we're getting better, and we had this, again, this group that came up with the encryption software to fight against this QuokeBot malware that Basta was using, is because we're having these conversations and we're not afraid to talk about this company got hit. Here was a solution. We've got a lot more of these white hat ethical hackers that are out there that found the vulnerability, like you're talking about with the torque wrench, and publicizing it and working with Bosch. And I give a lot of credit to a lot of these companies, Bosch, Siemens, Schneider Electric, Rockwell Automation. When these vulnerabilities are uncovered, they're working very quickly to provide that patch and figure out the solution before the hackers figure out how to take advantage of it. Yeah. But again, it's this more transparent and open dialogue about these problems that's helping lead to better solutions.
Anna, your thoughts on Black Basta?
That's very interesting, Jeff. And I appreciate your comment that we are getting better, because usually when you talk about cybersecurity, I feel sad.
Thank you for the positive spin.
Fair.
Yeah, finally.
Fair. Any insight on the naming mechanisms for these groups? Just Black Basta, Quackbot?
QuokeBot.
QuokeBot.
I don't know.
I'm just curious.
They do get creative. Like some of them, some of them were kind of weak. Like one of the big ones lately was that Cyber Avengers. I mean, you can do a little better than that.
I know. Just everyone gets to pick a letter.
Sort of nerdy.
Yeah. Then they put like a 3 in there instead of an E. It's like, come on,
We know what you're doing. It's better than when they do the $ instead of the S. Just like
the Kesha approach.
Yeah, I stopped doing that like 4th grade. We learned to make that like pointed S out of the 6 lines. Yeah. All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's move on to our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought?
I just want to say that I received a really nice gift box this week from a contributor. His name's Bob DeStefano. He runs SVM e-marketing solutions, which is a great firm that helps a lot of companies try to figure out how to navigate the web and how to market their business. Everybody's going online with e-commerce. And so it's an important strategy to remember that you can't just like pop a website online and be like, peace, that should do it. You need to send people there. And there's a lot of the things that you can do to be more effective at that. So anyway, but the gift box was like fruit and then all these like sweet treats in the middle. And I told my kids about it and they're like, where is it? And I was like, it's at work. And then they're like, my daughter said, isn't it weird to put fruit with like donuts and stuff? And I was like, no, it's perfect. It is the perfect. Yeah. It like really, you feel less bad about just like kind of hanging around by the gift box.
I'm going apple cider donut.
Right.
Apple cider donut dipped in powdered sugar.
Yeah.
Apple cookies. And I mean, by then the day is over and it's just like, all right, let's see you tomorrow. See what's left in the box.
So anyway, just wanted to say thanks for that. It was like really an exciting moment in my week at work. So
No, and I just would like to thank you for receiving that.
Not taking it and running.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for your sacrifice, children.
yeah.
It was delicious.
You know what? It was Valentine's Day this week. They are fine.
Yeah. So my final thought this week, Jeff, as you had mentioned earlier, I tried trying to fly home from the Anaheim show. I took an earlier flight, leaving Orange County at a reasonable, like, noon flight to get home, so that way I can drive at normal times. Not see my kids, but like not wake them up too late. You know, just like, hey, what's up? I'm here. Here's the thing that I bought you, even though you were terrible for your mother. Get on this 11:30 flight. I have no idea. You know, I'm over on the West Coast dealing with the atmospheric river that is causing people to not show up to the show the first day, but you know, we persevered. So I think, hey, the bad weather's over here. What's going on? What's going on in Wisconsin? Well, as we come to land in Milwaukee, you know, he comes over, the pilot comes over the overhead speaker and says, we're about 10 minutes out, might be a little bit of chop. It'll be okay. And
then you're like, why do I have to have the window covering open?
I already knew because I asked at takeoff. I didn't need to ask again. I learned. But as we start our descent in, all of a sudden, boom, we drop and like drop far enough where like as soon as the pilot said that, I tightened my belt because I'm just like, just in case. I normally keep it as like wide open as possible.
Yeah.
And even though I had tightened it, the drop was enough to pull all of us out of our seats.
Oh, wow.
And like not give the like scared, but like where it just pushes it out of you, like, oh. So we kind of like, we start into Milwaukee, and when you're coming into Milwaukee, you're coming over the lake. So it's complete darkness, and then you see the city. And we're coming into Milwaukee, and then all of a sudden we turn. And I was just like, oh, all right. Wasn't good, you know, maybe some sort of conflict, whatever. And then we're coming into Milwaukee again, and then we turn. I'm just like, okay, wasn't feeling good about that one too. And then we're kind of just hanging out up there, and all of a sudden, boom, the entire plane lights up, and we're struck by lightning. And
whoa,
the plane gets hit by lightning, and that one was the like, everyone was screaming like, oh my God. And I had this nice woman sitting next to me. She like couldn't speak very good English. And she's just like, what is happening? And I'm like, don't worry. Planes are made for this. We are fine. And then, meanwhile, as I'm like, my heart, she could like probably feel my heart beating. Like, cause you know, we're like touching shoulders, and she's like, I know you're not okay. Like I can sense it on you. But then they try one more time that we're coming into Milwaukee again. And then he pulls off again. And I'm just like, I'm not feeling good about this situation.
Yeah.
And I noticed that this time when we turn, we don't keep turning. We just keep heading south. I'm like, oh no. And all of a sudden they get over the intercom and they say, we're going to be landing in O'Hare in 10 minutes instead of Milwaukee, because they said it's going to be another 30 to 45 minutes. And we don't have enough fuel. We don't have enough fuel to hang out.
To land?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And so we land in O'Hare. They're just like, we're going to fill up. It's going to be 10 minutes. We're going to turn around. Then another 14 minutes to Milwaukee. We'll be no problem. Right. And I'm just like, great. Everyone just hang on. We had a couple of people that wanted to get off the plane. They're just like, my plane got hit by lightning. I'm not going to be on this plane anymore. And so there's a little kerfuffle with that, which I mean,
what's the option there? What's the logic?
I get it. Like there might be just general fears and anxiety, whatever. But then we get refueled and they're like, you know what? Since the plane got hit by lightning, we're obligated to send maintenance to check it out and just make sure everything's okay. I'm like, oh no, this is the beginning. And so then it became 30 minutes to which you had to stay on the airplane. And if you got off the airplane, you couldn't leave. And then it became, well, you know what? Just because we've been on here a while, we're just going to let everybody off. And if you want to get some food and beverages or whatever, you should be fine. God. And so I get off on that wave because I'm just like, all right, maintenance is going to be a little bit longer.
Okay. So at this point,
yeah,
I am getting a car.
Yeah?
Not even a doubt.
And there was that contingent, but I asked, I was just like, just be straight. And they're like, no, maintenance is sure that it'll be fine. Everything will be cleared and we go. And then it became, so that was like what? That was like 7:30. then it was 8:30, then it was 9:30, and then they get on the intercom and they're like, we're gonna push it back to 10:10, just a little bit more of a delay. I'm like, okay, I'm talking to my wife on the phone, and they're just like, ladies and gentlemen, our plane has been delayed one more time until 6 a.m. And I'm just like, oh, come on. And then you get the third audible gasp. And like, that was like the real anger where it's like, oh, come on. And I knew, like, I wasn't new to this. I took a beeline straight to the desk because I'm like, vouchers are going to start coming and they might run out. And that's when I was like, I was 13th in line. It took like 20 minutes to move. And so I did. That's when I pulled the Jeff. I was like, I looked to see what an Uber would cost to Milwaukee. I Ubered to Milwaukee. It was not bad. It was like $100 to Uber. And I was just like, between a hotel, I mean, what? You get a hotel, you get there like maybe midnight, best case scenario. Yeah. And then you flying out at 6 a.m. from O'Hare. So that means you got to leave at like 4:30. So I Uber to Milwaukee, drive home to Madison from there, get in about 2 a.m. I was a little squirrely. That day. But I'm just saying, Jeff, yes, it happened again. I can't go to the show, this particular show.
The thing that's most amazing is if you know David and his travel habits at all, the fact that you left your destination at noon, that never happens.
Never happens.
So, and from the closest airport. Yeah. I made it easy. Yeah. It was just, I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, man.
I was telling my wife about your struggles from that show specifically. Yeah. Some of the different adventures you've been on.
Yeah. I just, and you know what? It always works out. I always get to the show and I always get back. But man, it is trying sometimes. But that was a first. I don't recommend your plane getting hit by lightning.
Good call.
Pass. Ugh. So sorry, a little bit longer final thought. But, you know, I just want to get off my chest that I do try.
There you go.
Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
Well, while you were circling in stormy weather, getting struck by lightning, I headed to one of my favorite places on the planet last weekend, which was up to Eagle River to do some ice fishing. And whenever I take some time off about this time of year, there's always two questions. Mm-hmm. Where are you going? Going up north ice fishing. Followed immediately by why? Because to most people, they're thinking, you're out there, it's cold, you're staring at this line into a hole, what are you doing? And I can appreciate some of that. I mean, I enjoy it for very basic reasons, but I thought one of the best ways to illustrate that for those of you who would ask other people those questions is I shot a little bit of video. Now, the video was to troll my brother
gotcha.
Down in Arizona, but it also just kind of gave the perfect perspective because if, Eric, are you running that right now? If you can see that, we're on this lake. Now, we missed the big bite by about a week. Yeah. So there was nobody else on this lake, but this lake, it's basically a big pond. Yeah. Okay. So it's out there and it's in one of these settings. It's a cool February day. It was about 25 degrees. The sun was out. The sky was blue. Beautiful green evergreens in the background. And the only things you could hear, you could actually hear the trees.
Oh, hear the trees moving.
And you could hear the birds.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
so
that
nice.
is it. And I think what it really hit me is I love being in these settings, whether it's there or it's out in the woods doing a little bit of hunting, because I just get to feel really small.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great feeling to know that all this, there's a lot of things worth worrying about. Mm-hmm. Your friends, your family, and faith, and all of those things, that's important. But a lot of the other stuff that we can stress out about on a daily basis, it helps bring perspective to the fact that it's just not that big a deal.
Oh, yeah.
And it helps it go away. So why do I go ice fishing? It's not just because I enjoy catching fish, which I do, but it's also that. Yeah. And I think a lot of people can appreciate that. It just levels me out in an unbelievable way. So
I found just that video relaxing.
So, I mean, I would encourage others to find that thing. It doesn't need to be sitting on a, abandoned pond out in the middle of nowhere in northern Wisconsin, but find that thing because it just, that I'm good for months, after that type of experience.
But it's a good reminder that you don't have to overcomplicate it. You know, you don't have to travel great distances on with huge plans and big itineraries. It can just be chilling on a lake in nature. Yeah. Little hike. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a good review, positive review, the best review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can join us when we go live every Thursday. For Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manty. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.